All right. All right. Hi. Hey, everyone. Is that like everyone who survived? That's like not a large percentage. So okay. Hi to the people online. And I think kind of especially as we move on with the semester. So today I'm just gonna do a question you're all hopefully familiar with. I'll just like redo question 6. But you know, especially as we go on with the semester, I think one thing that you see is you know, it's really not enough to watch. And I think that's part of why like there's not very many people here is people like correctly recognize that it's really about writing code as opposed to watching me write code. At the same time, you know, if you code along with me, I feel like that could work. So I encourage you to do that. If you feel that I'm going too fast, like let me know. I can slow down. I don't mind. But I think kind of what I think kind of the best practice for, you know, the exam now is, you know, doing the projects, doing the labs, but also, you know, typing along during lecture, I think can also help because that's also programming. So okay. So question 6 was like this. So there were like student numbers and they were 10 digits. So this is 3, this is 3, and this is 3. And then each one was associated with a grade. Something like this. So I'll save this. Something like ESC180 txt. And then I'll save another one. And save is the same, just one person dropped, something like this. Okay. So, all right. So this is the data. I'll open the folder. So what do we want? So we want the person with the highest average, right? And we also want code that's short and easy to write because it's the midterm. Okay. So I think there's multiple approaches, but basically here is an idea, right? So if I know, it's like C comments, the highest average, need to just go through the students and find the student with that average. Okay, so if I knew that, then that would make my job easier. Also, in order to find the average for each, I want probably to have a function that that computes the average for a particular student. Right? So what else do I need? A list of students. All right. And I would say, and I'll do the hacky version because I want to kind of demonstrate what they think is the shortest way of doing it. And the hacky way of going through all the students is just go through all the files, say, hey, here's a student, I'll compute their average. Hey, here's another student, I'll compute their average. Here's another student, I'll compute their average. You'll compute the average multiple times for the same person that way, but you will go through all the students, right? So do people see the idea? So I'll save this. So just go through every file for each student encountered every time. Compute the average and keep track of the max. And then go through every file again. Find the student whose average is the max average. Make sense? So that's kind of the plan that I think I would go with if I were writing. Obviously, you can also do something like the project, but that requires setting up a bunch of stuff that maybe you don't want to set up. All right, so let's do that. So what are the functions that I want? So I want to be able to go through a particular file and get all the data there, right? So how would I do that? So I will just say, this is not going to be a function. It's going to be just a chunk of code. So I'll say int I, and I'll say for I equals 0, I plus plus. And here I'll open the file. I'll then go through every line in the file. So I'll say while this is not null, so I need my bar line over here. So this can be 100 because you just have 10 digits and then you have, 1 or 2 digits, that's the grade, right? So we got the line. So now what I need is I need the student number. What's the student number? The student number is just the line starting at 10. Sorry, ending at 10. So I'll copy the first 10 characters from the line to Christian 11 route 10. Yeah. Great. So now I have this is the current student. Make sense? Okay. So now that I have this, so this is a way to go through every student. right? So now for every time that I get the current student, I want to compute their average. So that would be a function. How do I find their average? Well, what I need to do is I need to just look through all the data, look through all the files, and then every time I see a grade, add it to the sum. So initially, the sum is going to be 0. And the number of courses, one of these courses, is going to be 0. And now what I'm going to do is literally this, right? So I'm trying to do it like in the most brute forcey way possible. So I'll just copy and paste. Well, you could copy and paste with arrows and stuff if you wanted to. There is like a more elegant way to do it, but we'll talk about it later. So here, what we're doing is we are going through every file. And here we have the current student. We'll then say, yes. So if the current student is the student we're looking for, then so that is one way of doing it. So I'll do it with ATOI because that's how we've done it in kind of in the assignment. So I'll ATOI line plus 11 into the grade. And now I'll add grade to the sum. And I'll increase the number of courses. So once I'm done, I just return the sum divided by the number of courses. So this is that student's average. So here, those are both integers. So this would be integer division. So I'll change this to a double so that there's no problem with integer division. And I'll return a double from find average. Make sense? All right. So this gets me the average for any given student. I will now say, okay, so here, I think we were we returning a string or something? I think we were, right? So, okay, we have the current student. So we'll check what the current max average is. And for now, it is 0. So the current average is going to be find average for the current student. And here we'll update the current max average. It's current average. So since we already have this, we might as well not copy and paste this another time and just update the student who has this average. So how should we do it? So if we are returning a car star, which I believe we are, we need to allocate it. So we'll say so this needs to be 11. And here we'll strcpy, this should be inside the while, of course. So we'll strcpy into the current max student from the current student. And now we'll return max student. And that's the function. Yeah. You would need to free it in the main, right? Because we are allocating it inside of find max average student. So here we'll define the main function now. No, so current student I do not need to free because that's an array. So that's a local variable that goes away. So here, so we'll define the files. So this would be, civ.txt and ESC190.txt. And we'll call that. And now we can print. Typing in because so you should get Copilot. I don't think so like we mentioned like in the beginning of the term. So what I'm using here is GitHub Copilot. I'm trying to type along even if it does do autocomplete so that you guys have a chance to type with me. But for lectures, I think it actually makes sense to install. So that would be like this. Does that make sense? Yeah. Not really. So so if we are returning a car star, then we got to malloc it. The other possibility would be to actually pass the string into which you want the answer to be written. So that's another possibility. So it's because it's not exactly that it's a local variable. So it's that if you return per student, you are returning the address of the first element of the array. But this array is local, so it goes away. So that's not an issue if you were returning like per max average, because even though per max average is a local variable, it does go away. if you're returning its value, it gets copied in the same way that the address returned at 0 would be copied, but that address would not anymore be valid, right? So for a string, the information is the actual address, and the contents of the string are at the address. For something like a double, the information is the value. So that gets copied in the same way that the address gets copied too. All right. Questions about this? All right. Is anyone still, I don't see anyone typing. I realize that people have been writing for the last 2 hours. So yeah. Okay. Are people good with this? All right. Okay. Any questions? Yeah. So you would be repeatedly computing the average for the same student. No, so I'm looking through, so I'm looking for the data for each student, right? So I encounter this, so I just go and open CIF.txt and ESC190 and they go through each entry, right? So I will be computing the average for this person twice, because I'll encounter them once here, and then I'll also encounter them once here. But that's fine, because all I need is to know what the max is. Once I know what the max is, I'm done. All right. So in principle, you could also, of course, say, are people fine with this? So you could also say, I want to do it in a more civilized way, which I think would mean that you would set up an array of 300 students, and then you would try to, every time you see a student, you add to the sum of their marks, right? If you decide not to do that, so if you decide to store all the marks, that becomes more difficult, because essentially you need to do something like the dynamic array, where if it turns out that you have more marks, then you maybe need to realloc, so that's more annoying. You can so if you know the max, the number of students and the number of courses, you can say, well, like, the most marks that you can have is the number of courses. So you can actually just look at that and pre-allocate an array of that size. Does that make sense? So let's do that. So, okay. So let's define. And we'll do it like the extremely civilized way. So we'll have the ID. So we'll have the grades. And we'll have the num grades. And we'll have the average, which will compute after we have all the grades and after we have the num grades, but have that, and that would be a double. Okay. So now what we want to do is fill this in. So here students is a block. That's pre-allocated. So if it's pre-allocated, that means that we need a separate function that creates the block. So that would be like this, right? So the reason it's like this, is we want to be able to call it using something like this. Make sense? So let's call it P students. So what do we do here? So this would be the usual thing. So P students, we malloc it. Like so. We now need to pre-allocate the grades because grades, we don't know ahead of time how many of them there are, but here we know now. Right? So, okay, this is now pre-allocated. We'll now set the number of grades to 0 initially. And we'll set the average to be 0 initially. Do people have questions about this? Does this make sense? Okay. So this is the block of students. Once that's created, we can now read the things in. So to do that, I'll scroll to over here and I'll copy my code for reading in the grades. So this is all good, right? So here, this is like this. So what do I need to change here? Well, here, rather than saying what is it, is this the current student or something? We have the current line, right? So this is going to be current student. And this is going to be the current mark. I guess this is called grade. So, okay. So we read in current student, we read in the grade. We now need to go through all the students, and that would be the slow part, and update the correct student. Okay, so we look through all the students and see whether the current student ID matches the current student ID. So if yes, then we essentially append the grade to grades. Does that make sense? So here, grades, initially we put the first grade we see into grade 0, and then the second grade we see into grades 1, and so on. And we increase the number of grades. So that's similar to integer array. Okay, so that's good. But we also need to